My parents promised me the empire I built for 15 years. Then I discovered my brother owned 90% of it for 15 years. I believed I was building my family's future. I started with nothing more than a small desk, an old laptop, and an idea that everyone around me thought was too risky. Today that idea had become a successful company. We had employees. We had offices. We had clients across several cities. And most importantly, I believed my parents and I had built it together. They had always told me the same thing. One day all of this will be yours. I believed them. I believed every word. That belief would cost me more than I ever imagined. My name is Daniel, and this is the story of how I discovered that the company I had spent 15 years building was almost entirely controlled by my older brother. And the worst part? My parents knew. It began when I was 23. At the time I was working 2 jobs just to pay my bills. During the day I worked at a small electronics store. At night I repaired computers for people in my neighborhood. I had always loved technology. I believed that one day I could build something of my own. One evening I showed my father a business plan I had created. He read it quietly. When he finished he looked at me and smiled. "You really want to do this?" I nodded. "Then we'll help you." Those words changed my life. My parents didn't have much money, but they contributed what they could. My mother gave me some savings she had kept for years. My father helped me rent a tiny office. My older brother, Michael, promised to help with accounting. I trusted all of them. The first few years were incredibly difficult. There were months when I couldn't pay myself. There were times when I considered giving up. But my parents always encouraged me. "Keep going," my mother would say. "Someday this will all belong to you." Those words became my motivation. I worked 12-hour days. Sometimes 14. I learned marketing. I learned sales. I learned management. I personally contacted our first 100 customers. Slowly the company grew. 5 employees became 10. 10 became 30. Then we opened our second office. By the 10th year we were doing extremely well. I remember celebrating our 10th anniversary with my parents. My father raised his glass. "To our family business." I smiled. I didn't correct him. I thought of the company as our family business too. But there was one person who never seemed happy about my success. My brother. Michael had joined the company early, but unlike me he never worked as hard. He was responsible for finances, but he rarely stayed late. He missed meetings. He ignored clients. And whenever I confronted him, my parents defended him. "He's your brother. Family should support family. Don't make everything about work." I listened. Because I didn't want money to destroy our relationship. Then during our 15th year everything changed. We were having dinner at my parents' house. It was supposed to be a celebration. Our company had just signed its biggest contract. I was excited. I told my parents that we were planning to open offices in 3 more cities. My father smiled. "That's wonderful." Then my mother said something that I still remember. "Your brother deserves some credit too." I looked at Michael. He simply smiled. "I've handled the finances all these years," he said. I nodded. "Yes, you have." Then my father put his fork down. "We need to talk about the future." I assumed they wanted to discuss retirement. Instead, my father said, "We've decided Michael will take over the company." I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because I genuinely thought they were joking. "What?" My mother looked uncomfortable. "Your brother has more experience with the financial side." I stared at them. "But I built this company." Michael leaned back in his chair. "Nobody is saying you didn't." "Then what are you saying?" He didn't answer. My father did. "We're saying the company structure isn't exactly what you think it is." Something inside me went cold. "What does that mean?" My mother reached for a folder beside her. She placed it on the table. "Look at the documents." I opened the folder. The first page looked normal. Then I saw the ownership percentages. I read them once. Then twice. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Michael owned 90%. I owned 10. I looked at my father. "How?" He sighed. "When the company was young, we created a holding structure." "You created it?" "Yes." "Without telling me?" "We thought you were too young to understand." I stared at the papers. 15 years. 15 years of work. 15 years of sacrifices. And I owned 10% of the company I had built. Michael finally spoke. "Technically, everything was done legally." I looked at him. "Legally?" He shrugged. Yes. I felt betrayed. Not because of the money. Because everyone had known. My parents had watched me work year after year. They had watched me build the company. And they had never told me. I stood up. I'm leaving. My father looked surprised. Where are you going? I don't know. I walked out. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my apartment staring at old photographs. My first office. Our first employee. The day we signed our first major client. My parents standing beside me. Michael smiling in the background. I kept asking myself the same question. How could the people I trusted most do this? The next morning I called a lawyer. I brought every document I had. The lawyer spent several hours reviewing them. Finally he looked at me. There's something important you need to understand. What? Your brother may own 90% of the company. My heart sank. But ownership isn't the only issue. He showed me several contracts. My name was on many of them. Founder. Managing Director. Chief Executive. The person who had negotiated major agreements. The person who had created the original business model. My lawyer smiled slightly. You have more leverage than you think. For the first time in days I felt hope. Over the next several weeks I did something I had never done before. I stopped fighting emotionally. I started fighting intelligently. I collected every email. Every contract. Every business plan. Every financial report. Every message between my parents and me. I documented everything. Then I discovered something even more shocking. The ownership arrangement had been changed only 3 months after the company became profitable. Before that I had been listed as the majority owner. Someone had changed the documents. And I had never signed the new agreement. My lawyer looked at me. Did you authorize this? No. Did you sign this? No. Then we have a serious problem. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted. Because suddenly I realized this wasn't simply a family disagreement. It could become a legal battle. I confronted my parents one final time. We met at the same restaurant where they had first told me about the 90% ownership. I placed the documents on the table. My mother began crying. My father looked away. Michael became angry. You went to a lawyer? Yes. You don't trust your own family? I looked directly at him. You changed my ownership without telling me. He didn't answer. My father finally spoke. We were afraid. Afraid of what? That you'd lose everything. I almost laughed. You took everything from me because you were afraid I'd lose it? Nobody answered. Then my mother whispered, we thought Michael would protect the company. I looked at my brother. Protect it from me? Her eyes filled with tears. No. Then from whom? She couldn't answer. That silence told me everything. The legal process took months. It wasn't easy. There were meetings, negotiations, arguments, documents, audits. For the first time in 15 years I wasn't working to grow the company. I was working to prove what I had already built. Eventually the truth became impossible to hide. The original ownership documents showed that I had been the majority owner. The later transfer had never been properly authorized. The company had been built primarily through my work, my contracts, and my management. The final settlement gave me controlling ownership. Michael was required to surrender his claim to the majority stake. My parents stepped away from the company entirely. I won. But I didn't feel like I had won. I had gained control of the company. But I had lost something much more valuable. Trust. Months later I stood inside the first tiny office where everything had begun. The room looked different now. The old desk was still there. The same window. The same walls. I remembered the young man I had been 15 years earlier. He had believed his family would always stand behind him. I wished I could go back and tell him something. Work hard. Trust people. But never stop understanding your own life. I didn't close the company. Instead I rebuilt it. I changed the ownership structure. I hired independent financial professionals. And I created something my family had never given me. Transparency. Every employee knew exactly how the company operated. Every major decision required documentation. Nobody could secretly control another person's future again. 1 year later my father called me. We hadn't spoken in months. He asked if we could meet. I agreed. We sat together in a quiet cafe. For several minutes neither of us said anything. Then he looked at me. I'm sorry. Those 2 words were difficult to hear. Not because they were painful. Because I had waited so long for them. I should have told you, he continued. I should have trusted you. I nodded. I needed you to believe in me. I did. I looked at him. No, Dad. You believed in the company. You didn't believe in me. He lowered his eyes. I know. We sat there quietly. I didn't forgive him immediately. Forgiveness isn't something you owe someone just because they finally apologize. But I decided I didn't want anger controlling the rest of my life. So I said, I can't forget what happened. I understand. But maybe someday we can build a different relationship. My father nodded. And for the first time in years he smiled. Not the proud smile of a businessman. Not the smile of a father watching his son become successful. Just the tired smile of a man who finally understood what his choices had cost him. I never gave the company back. I never apologized for protecting what I had built. And I never allowed anyone to make decisions about my future without my knowledge again. Looking back, I realized something important. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the people sitting beside you at the dinner table. And sometimes the hardest lesson isn't learning how to build an empire. It's learning when to stop trusting people who secretly want to control it. I spent 15 years building my company. But it took one dinner to teach me the true value of independence. And if there is one thing I would tell anyone listening to my story, it is this. Love your family. Respect your family. Support your family. But never be afraid to understand your own rights, your own work, and your own future. Because trust is important. But transparency is what keeps trust alive. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't walk away. It's stand up, discover the truth, and finally say, this is my life. And from now on I decide what happens next.